Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. I'm here to ask and answer one simple question. WTF is This War of Mine? This is a game brought to you by 11-bit. They're responsible for titles such as the Anomaly series. As you can also see down at the bottom there, it's got a link to the charity War Child. If you click that, you'll be able to give a donation. Question is, what is the game? It is a survival game of sorts. It is a 2D kind of point-and-click survival, and it's based in the middle of a fictional war. Now, rather than playing a soldier, you play survivors who will start off in a ramshackle hovel, which you'll attempt to transform into some kind of reasonable living space, and you'll also attempt not to die. In order to do that, you're going to have to avoid starvation, dying of cold, dying of sickness, dying of getting shot in the face, and so on and so forth. It's certainly not an easy task by any stretch of the imagination. Now, the game is split into two time periods, the day cycle and the night cycle. During the day, you can build things, you can eat, you can rest, you can operate things within your shelter. In this case, I've been spending a good amount of time setting this up. This is, I think, about 4 hours into this play session. I've survived to day 19, which is not terrible. I've had one person die, unfortunately. My poor workman. He got killed. That was very sad. He went into a place he shouldn't have and got shot by rebels. It was really that simple. But outside of that, I'm surviving. I'm not doing too terribly. We're always sort of on the brink of starvation, but I think we're in a better position than we've ever been. We've got food in the fridge, we have a stove here, and we're trying to set up a few things which will allow us to grow herbs and vegetables, which is certainly a very tricky thing indeed to do. So, what exactly do, you might be asking? Because Kat here seems to be sitting around doing nothing other than drinking coffee. It's important that you do that, because morale is a big part of this game. Your survivors can get sad, your survivors can get depressed, your survivors can become mentally broken and possibly commit suicide if horrible things happen. This is not a happy-go-lucky game. You can probably tell by the rather washed-out aesthetic here with the rather nice pencil filter effect that's going on here. No, it's not a happy game. It has its moments of happiness, but those moments of happiness are, of course, made simply more effective by the fact that a lot of the game simply is not happy at all. Alright, so this fellow is a little bit hungry. We need to go make some food, so I'm going to go do that. He's also tired. I sent him out scavenging the night before. Unfortunately, we have two wounded survivors kind of taking up the beds here, so what would be nice if we could build a third bed, but I don't know if I have the resources to do it. So I'm going to make some food here, and Katia is also hungry and tired, so she'll probably need to deal with that as well. All of these items that you see in the refuge, I suppose you could call it, are things that I crafted, and you do that with materials. If I click on our things, you'll see these are all the materials that I currently have. It's also going to give you some thoughts, which is going to give you a description of what's currently going on, a general overview of how people are feeling, and it gives you some little hints as to what you actually need. These are some of the materials I've got. I also have a weapon. I've got no bullets for this damn thing, so it's not really all that much use, but I do have a gun and a couple of pieces of equipment, including a fire axe and a crowbar, which can be used for various environmental interactions. You can use an axe to chop up old furniture to get the wood and fuel back. You can also use it as a weapon, of course. And you can use the crowbar to pry open locked doors and cupboards and things like that, but it does make a lot of noise. These can also be used as makeshift weapons. These are my basic items. I have various foodstuffs, canned goods, vegetables. I have some fertilizer right here, which I'm hoping to use to grow some vegetables. A few cigarettes. These are things that you could potentially trade with people in the town, or with the trader who happens to wander to your place every few days. And these are materials that you use for crafting. I have a ton of random generic components. I've got a decent amount of wood as well. We might be able to make another bed after all. I even have some nice electronic parts and things like that, and some moonshine and all sorts of things like that. So that's your inventory, and that's kind of how it works. And you can see to the side there, I'm consuming a lot of cigarettes because I have a smoker in my party, and I'm also consuming a decent number of cups of coffee, and I have upgraded my shelter to have no holes in the wall anymore, so it's much, much harder to raid, and that can certainly happen. So it's not doing too bad. All right, cool. We've cooked something, so I'm going to send Katia up there to eat, and Roman, who's been out all night, is also going to eat, and then what we'll do is probably try and make a third bed. We can store it under here, and then Roman can go and get some sleep. I think scavenging is probably going to be on the head of Katia tonight, which is maybe not ideal, but it's just going to have to do the job. Alright, once she's eaten, we can go and build another bed. We'll go to the workbench right here. everything's very easy to Everything is very easy to interact with. It's evidently not easy to say, but it's fairly easy to interact with. There's not really too many problems there. Everything is point and click. This is up to and including the combat, by the way, which is something I'll talk about a little bit later. We're going to put the third bed down here. So there's actually no tutorial whatsoever. You're expected to sort of fumble around immediately once you get into the game and figure out what's what. It's not really that hard. I mean, if you see a hand, that means you can interact with it. If you see an axe, that means you can chop it up into firewood. It's all fairly self-explanatory. These are crafting tables, so you can craft. This is an upgrade arrow, so you upgrade. All of this makes perfect sense. I think we're going to go craft some more filters as well, because I need some more water, and it would be nice to make some more moonshine, because I can perhaps trade that later. So if we go to consumables, that's going to take, okay, you know, we'll make 3 filters out of the components here. There we go. And Catty is down there building the bed, and these two are trying to sleep off wounds. Pavle, unfortunately, got shot about a week ago and is recovering. Frankly, he's little more than a burden at the moment, which is the reality of having to deal with survival. This is very much a survival game. So if one of your fellows becomes a burden, well, that's just simply the way that it has. I mean, it has to be. If you want to be... oh, dear, he's bleeding. That's not good. Okay. He's trying to recover, but it looks like we're out of bandages, so that's something we might have to go and try and find tonight. Alright, once we've made those filters, I can send Roman to bed, and then we can start with this. There we go. I could send him out to die. I mean, that's a good way of maybe getting rid of him, but that has consequences. Everything that your survivors do has consequences on their mental state. Some things will make them very content and happy. Most things will make them sad. If you end up having to, say, rob an innocent civilian or something like that to try and get supplies that you desperately need, that can actually have some real psychological impact on your survivors, and that's the sort of thing that can spread. It can be difficult to manage, and there are some who may be pushed beyond the breaking point and they may decide to commit suicide. It is a grim game, because ultimately this is a game about war. And it's strange when we think about it, I suppose. We think, well, it's a game about war and it's super grim. And that seems extremely common sense, doesn't it, when you think about it? But ultimately, it's actually not. If you compare it to any other form of media, war in games is often glorified, or at least just kind of turned into an action movie. It's used as a set piece because, of course, action games have a lot of shooting, a lot of killing in it, and what better way to do it than put you in the middle of a war? Makes perfect sense, but there aren't all that many games that really kind of deal with the horrors of war and really commit to that. There's some games that touch on it, and of course there's games like Spec Ops The Line, which do a good job, but even Spec Ops The Line is couched in gameplay, which is very generic, and one could argue, of course, that that is deliberate, and they need to fix that spelling mistake there. You could argue that that's deliberate to try and get the message across, and it's like, hey, look at how sort of generic this whole genre is and how silly it is, but ultimately it's still a game that's using those mechanics, so you've got to say, well, really, can you actually get away with doing that? Does that make a huge degree of sense? Well, this is a game that can get away with doing that, because... Okay, cool. We're actually going to go and scavenge now. This is the second phase of the game, by the way. This is a game that can get away with doing that, because it fixates on the idea that you must survive in a war zone. You are not a trained combatant. You can fight. Not very well, but you can fight. But more often than not, you want to be sneaking around. And this component of the game is where that actually happens. So in every game of this War of Mine that you play, you end up with access to different places, and it also starts you at different time. Sometimes it may start you during the winter, which means you're going to have to be burning a lot of fuel and firewood. Thankfully, my playthrough is in the summer, which means that I've survived a lot longer. But the game likes to give you random access to different places. So the small apartment building can't get there due to fighting, can't get there due to fighting. There's a lot of stuff that I can't access due to fighting, but I can go to these places. Now, unfortunately, these are starting to run out of things to scavenge, and the ones that aren't, well, they're quite dangerous. I do not really want to send Katia into a dangerous place. I could maybe go back to the hotel and sneak around a little bit. That worked relatively well for me last time. It looks like there's food and medicine parts and weapon parts here as well, but I also know there are some rebels here. So if I am sneaky, then I should be able to deal with that. Or I could go to the central square, because this is a place that I could go to trade or try and break into the apartment buildings there. The supermarket I've pretty much cleared out. There's weapon parts, but that's really about it. I don't really want to get those because they're not really all that useful. What I do need is medicine. Apparently the Shelled School has a ton of medicine, but there's a bunch of rebel militiamen there. I could just go and try and trade for medicine at the central square, so I'm going to go do that. Okay, what have we got to trade? Well, We've got some decent cigarettes. We could probably bring those along. These are reasonably valuable for trade. We can bring along the moonshine. Don't have a lot of that, unfortunately. And we could maybe... that's actually probably about it for valuable stuff, isn't it? And I'm just going to take the crowbar with me just in case anything horrible goes on. You can never quite tell whether or not it's going to happen. All right. Now we can wander around. And each of these different areas, of course, has different people to interact with. Some of them are hostile, some of them are not. In the city square, most people are not hostile, so there's nothing really to worry about too much. I'm kind of sneaking around here for no real reason. But I know there is a medicine vendor here who might be quite useful to deal with. There we go. Let's see. So I'm looking for bandages, and apparently these bandages are very cheap right now. So let's see if I can trade some... Oh, wow. That's a very, very cheap for bandages. 1 quality roll-up will get me 3 bandages. That's good. Pure alcohol, on the other hand, quite expensive, but I'll take some painkillers as well. Why not? There we go. I will trade 1 cigarette for all of this stuff. That's pretty good. I actually noticed that the game seems to have something of a variable economy. I'm not really sure what actually affects that. There are some times when food is really, really cheap. Other times it's extremely expensive. Not really sure what determines all of that stuff, but right now, I mean, I can get almost all of these things for nothing. It also seems that maybe some of the actions you take throughout the game might cause some vendors to treat you better. And I know there are various events that happen which will have a knock-on effect on things you're doing later on. This food is so cheap. There we go. I'll take all of that. I'll even take some water. I can make that myself, but let's... My cigarettes? Nope, my cigarettes are not enough. The moonshine? Okay, so I can take some of the cigarettes off there. There we go. I can actually just trade the moonshine for all of this, so that works for me. There we go. Alright, some pretty decent trades up to this point. Also have a little look in this bush, see if there's anything worth scavenging. So this is a non-hostile area, at least at the moment. There's nothing really to worry about here, unless I try and break into this area over here, in which case I will have a problem. Now, they will try and attack me. I could maybe steal some valuable stuff from there, but it is a little bit dangerous. So it's probably not the world's best idea. So I just want to try and avoid combat for the time being. A lot of the game you're going to be spending not fighting, and you can't mow your way through a lot of enemies. You're not going to have the health for it, you don't have the combat skill, and you certainly do not have the ammunition, which is very expensive and difficult to deal with. I fired my last 2 bullets a few nights ago defending against raiders, so that could be a bit of a problem. Now, I mean, I could break my way through there if I wanted, but there's a bunch of people in there that are going to try and murder me if I even consider it, so I am not going to attempt to do that for the time being. Alright, well, I think we've done some reasonable trading. There might be something on this other vendor that I might want to get, because he might have some interesting components. So I'll have a word with him, see if he wants to trade. And if he does not, then we can leave. Might get the half-dismantled shotgun might be useful. That's something I might be able to build up later. And there's nothing wrong with having things like extra wood. Let's see what he thinks about my cigarettes. There we go. Seems like a decent enough trade. Maybe I can get a bit more for it. Yep. Lots of wood. Can't carry that much. Okay, never mind then. There we go. We can probably take away... There we go. Still can't carry that much. Okay. I need a bigger backpack. If that's possible, by the way, I haven't seen it in the game, so... What's in my backpack now? Okay, we're full. Alright, time to go home. And that's pretty much a day in this war of mine. It's really that simple. And this was a fairly uneventful day. The hope is, of course, that during the night we weren't raided, and if we were, that we were able to defend ourselves. Could be difficult. I mean, we do have a gun, but no bullets, so that might not be helpful. We did board up the place, which makes it a bit harder to raid, but there are risks. I mean, my guys are pretty badly wounded, so it's probably not going to work too well. There we go. We got some medicine. Yep, Bruno and Pavle are having trouble. So I'm going to go down there and I'm going to treat them. I can also bring them food. And we can have conversations, which I probably will do, so... And she's currently depressed. Not good. Alright, so I've done a little bit of a run-through of what this game actually is. So I think you can kind of see the way that the game works on a day-by-day basis. This is pretty much the extent of the mechanics outside of the combat and the stealth. The stealth is fairly basic. It's based on sound, which is... what some people have kind of described as a little bit Mark of the Ninja, which is fair to say because it uses a sort of fairly similar ping system, a very visual element that you can see on the screen. And the sound and the line of sight is pretty self-explanatory. You know, there's not really much to say with that. Actually have a word with him. What am I think I'm shaking him about a little bit for some reason. That's because he is depressed. All right, well, that's not good. You are not alone. Let's have words with him, and might want to go and get Pavle some of those and some painkillers, actually. Oh, God, he's slightly sick as well. Jesus. We are going to burn through some medicine at the moment. So yeah, we'll hopefully show you a little bit of combat maybe in the next night, and that unfortunately might involve some of my folks dying if I'm not careful, but that's the way that the mechanics work. Everything's point and click, everything's reasonably slow-paced. To some degree, one might be able to argue that it's a little bit too slow-paced at times. During the day, you can end up in situations where, frankly, there's really not a lot going on. But usually there's at least something you can do, whether it be making food, trying to improve your shelter in some way, and of course you can plan that out in the nights ahead. Alright, someone's at the door, let's see what they've got to say. I'm certainly hoping that they're not here to kill me, because they very well might be. Alright. Extra pair of hands, yeah. Yeah, I can go help, there we go. This is usually a pretty good idea. It usually means that one of your folks is going to wander off for a while, but you can end up getting a nice little bonus at some point later down the line. Of course, it's just nice to help people, right? Absolutely. He's bandaged and he's hungry. Okay, go eat some canned food and then go to bed, right? Jeez. Okay, at least the depression is gone. That's good. Alright, and we could... There we go. Go eat some canned food. It is delicious. So the mechanics are reasonably simplistic, but they do the job, ultimately. Now, it's designed around a fairly simple visual point-and-click interface, and there really isn't a huge amount wrong with the way that it works. The only complaint that I've got is that the combat is basic, although one could make the argument that that is deliberate. You are certainly by no means a sharpshooter, you are not a member of the military. And it shows. You are just regular survivors, regular people caught up in a horrible situation. And that's really what the game focuses on. And it's a very effective and compelling way of telling a survivor story. And the setting works perfectly with the idea of survival. We've done survival games before. We've got things like Don't Starve, we've got things like DayZ. They all focus on either supernatural or zombie stuff. This is a very real survival game. And they certainly take liberties from time to time with the mechanics. They have to oversimplify certain elements of it in order to make the game actually work. But the setting works very, very well, and it establishes a situation where you are faced with moral quandaries. But those moral quandaries are really nicely tied into the game mechanics and the way that the story's being told. Do you make a decision to go and steal from elderly people? Do you take from the innocent because you need to survive? If you do that, there will be consequences for your survivors, but it may be necessary at some point. Do you send out an injured survivor to go and scavenge even though you know it's a potentially huge risk? Potentially you do. There we go. Alright, we're just going to end the day now. Everyone's sleeping. I think we'll just not go out and scavenge tonight. It seems like everyone just needs to sleep. So... we're going to go and do that, and hopefully we will not get raided during the night. That would suck if we did. And it's these moral quandaries and the setting that really propels the game from being what would otherwise be a reasonably mundane survival simulator with a fairly slow point-and-click interface into something that can actually give you pause when you make certain decisions. And it does it in a very organic way. It doesn't feel contrived. It feels like, yeah, this is the exact sort of situation that I would potentially run into if I happened to be in a war zone. And yet it's a war game that doesn't focus on combat, and yet still manages to be compelling. In fact, I would even argue it manages to be more compelling because it doesn't focus on the combat. It makes combat very, very risky. It makes killing a big deal. These are regular people. They don't kill for a living. If they put a bullet in someone's head, they're probably not going to be too happy about it afterwards. Even if that person was trying to kill them, they could become traumatized by that sort of behavior. Or they could end up being hardened by it. They could end up saving the life of an innocent, which will make them more content and will give them a morale boost. It's all very, very interesting. And I've actually got to applaud 11-bit for being able to take on such subject matter. Now, there's going to be something that some of you are perhaps asking. It's like, well, that doesn't really sound like an awful lot of fun. Well, here's the thing about fun. A lot of people like to scoff at the idea of games being fun, because apparently we've got past that point. Fun is a neurological trick, some bloggers and writers would say. Yeah, well, so are emotions, but this is the sort of game that can trigger an emotional response. It doesn't... The idea of fun is a little bit nebulous. I mean, but what's more important is the game compelling and a challenge? And the answer to both is yes. It's compelling in a way where there are emotional ups and downs directly linked to the way that the game mechanics work. And it just works so well in the survival genre. I think a lot of the issues that perhaps we have with video games are focused on this idea that specific genres may perhaps hold back our ability to engage the player on an emotional level. Now, that does not mean that we should abandon those genres entirely. It's something that I had a problem with BioShock. A lot of people like to use the wonderful term ludonarrative dissonance or ludonarrative disco biscuits or whatever it is. And it's a frequently misused term, but the point kind of remains the same. With a game like BioShock Infinite that tries to trigger an emotional response in you and tries to deal with the ideas of morality, it doesn't necessarily work when you are in a world where you have to slaughter hundreds and hundreds of people and then loot them for ammo and things like that. It's almost like BioShock Infinite shouldn't have been an FPS, because FPS in general involve a lot of shooting, and it can be a little bit more difficult to engage the player on an emotional level, but simultaneously you shouldn't necessarily have to engage the player on an emotional level, because that's not necessarily what FPS players are looking for. Now, with the survival genres have always been, I say always, they haven't exactly been around for a while. The survival genre is a little bit grim, you know? It's not a pleasant genre, necessarily, but it's focused on the idea that, yes, there may be real moments of triumph that occur. And it's those moments of triumph and the successes, as well as dealing with your failures, that really make the game compelling and satisfying. And, of course, make it a challenge. And it's those three things that make the game worth playing. I wouldn't say go into this game thinking, oh, right, well, I'm looking for an emotional experience. Because for some people, it just might not resonate. For me, it has. I have encountered several moments in this game where I have had to think twice, or I've really regretted doing something, and it's put me in a nasty frame of mind. And of course, it's also had consequences on the in-game characters, which is great. Oh, it's not just a case of relying on the player to feel something. It's like, press F to feel. No, there are real in-game mechanical consequences, and I don't think you can necessarily ignore that, because when it comes to video games, that may very well be the biggest strength of the genre. Game mechanics, when linked with narrative, can cause much more effective emotional responses in the player than just simply trying to batter a player around the head with this idea of, time to feel, guys. Better get to it. Oh, you're not feeling? Feel some more. This is the moment where you're supposed to feel something. No, in this game, it just seems to happen naturally. And the game expresses it so well through the mechanics. And the genre is just perfect for it. It's absolutely ideal. I think we might want to make another weapon before we go out. I'm not sure if we can... I do have some weapon components. I might be able to make some ammunition. Oh, we're out of cigarettes. We might be able to fix that. We'll see what we can do here. I need to upgrade this. Yeah, I could upgrade it to a herbal workshop. I think we might be fresh out of tobacco, but we could go and grow some, perhaps. That might be a good idea. Oh, and Roman is feeling good again. That's fantastic. Always lovely. Alright, we could grow some herbs. I have water and fertilizer for it, and then we can make some cigarettes, and people can stop complaining about the lack of bloody cigarettes. Lovely. Just lovely. In the meantime, let's see if we can go and build a weapon, assuming I have the components left. Oh, nah, it's too late. We're gonna actually end up in the nighttime now, by the looks of it. And we're gonna have to think about heating, too, which is just lovely. Okay, no, that's upgrades. Ah, I don't have weapon parts. I'm gonna need to go scavenge for that. I know there are some weapon parts at the supermarket, so it might be worth going there. I can probably send Roman off to do that, which will be lovely. So what do I think of it? Is it worth playing? Well, I think it's definitely worth a couple of playthroughs. There are definitely times when you can get horribly screwed over, because you might start the game in winter, which will make things very, very difficult for you. And certainly the first playthrough, very much focused on trial and error. Ooh, they've unlocked a bunch of new stuff. Interesting. Semi-detached house. It's dangerous. Small apartment building, also dangerous, but lots of interesting things here. Well, if I'm sneaky enough with Roman, then maybe I should be okay. A crowbar is a reasonable weapon, assuming you can sneak around with it. So I'm gonna head to the... We'll head to the semi-detached house and see if there's anything there. And we're gonna take the crowbar with us. Should help us get through. No ammunition, so this will have to do. Alright, let's see what we can do. We'll be a little bit sneaky, and hopefully I can show you the combat system here. I might deliberately get one of my people killed. Just to show you how it works. Alright, very, very careful. You'll notice there are hiding places every once in a while. These are very useful. It looks like there's someone up here. Let's just be careful. See what we can find. I'm not sure why I whisper when I'm sneaking around. I think that's a very gamer thing to do, isn't it? Oh, these are all good. Okay, weapon parts. We were looking for those. Don't really need any more books. Ooh, that is not good. Okay, I am not going under there. That seems dangerous. Let's go down to the basement and see if we can get something done. Find something useful and get out of here without being detected. Now, if I've got a problem with the game, it probably is with the fairly basic combat. It's particularly true with weapons. You have to sort of repeatedly click in order to do damage, and it seems fairly unreliable. And that, to me, is a bit of a problem because you die very, very quickly. It seems to me if you're going to have very quick death and serious consequences for every hit you take, which they do have, then you need to be a little bit careful with how your combat system is designed. And to me, it seems a little bit, perhaps, too imprecise. So we'll be able to sneak up through here. Well, let's look through the keyhole. Okay, I think they're out of range, so I should be able to crowbar through this, hopefully without making too much sound. So hopefully they won't hear me. So the combat that I got into, I've maybe been only in 3 fights, honestly, because you don't fight an awful lot in this game. It's definitely felt very tense, no doubt about that, but it seems like it's felt tense for the wrong reasons. And you could make the argument that, oh, well, it's deliberately imprecise. And I've heard that argument made in a number of different games, but I don't think that's necessarily a good way of doing things. Oh, yes. Ooh, medicine. Yeah, very useful. Okay, let's have a quick look through here. Anyone we need to worry about? Nope. If we're just quiet, we can keep raiding this, hopefully without too much of a problem. In fact, I'm actually going to try and club this guy around the head. If I'm very sneaky, I might be able to kill him in one blow. I could also steal his weapon. Nice! Alright. Oh, I think I've alerted them. Alright. Oh, crap. Oh. I'm a terrible human being. I don't think she was a psychopath at all. I think I just murdered their guard. Well, Oh, damn it. You see what I mean about feelings? This game has them in spades, but it conveys them in such a way that makes sense. It's a war game, of course there's gonna be atrocities. It's about survival, of course you're gonna do things that are distasteful in order to make sure that you make it to the next day. It's a damn compelling idea, and it's, for the most part, well executed. Of course, there's a little bit of RNG involved in it. You might end up with just a crappy start, which could absolutely suck. Actually, if there's a person through here, this might be a very stupid thing to do. Just hoping there isn't. Although I can probably fight them. No, it's just rats, okay. Is it fun? No. Is it compelling and challenging and absolutely worthy of your time if you have any interest whatsoever in survival? Damn right. Absolutely. This is a game that should not be ignored. It's a brave and effective attempt to approach war in a different way. And rather than being preachy, it ends up being just a very human experience. It feels very much like what I would expect from a Warzone. It's perhaps even a little less grim than it should be. But that's obviously just a creative decision from 11-bit. They didn't want to go too overboard with it. They do deal with some nasty concepts. And I applaud them for having the willingness to do that. Because there aren't a huge number of games that are willing to take on difficult concepts, and there are even fewer that manage to do it while also being an effective gaming experience. And this War of Mine, to me, is all of those things and then some. And I think that the developers should be applauded for managing to make that happen, for managing to write interesting characters, but without going overboard on the backstory and allowing you to create your own, without shoehorning in pointless anti-war sentiment. You don't need anti-war sentiment in this game. The whole game is anti-war because you are expected to do things that are frankly horrific. I read his bio. It's the law of the jungle in war. You kill or you die. There's no way. If I hadn't done that, someone else would have. I did what was necessary. But did we? Did we have to do that? Did I have to murder that person in cold blood? I don't know. Hard to say. It's War of Mine, ladies and gentlemen. It's available on Steam, as well as Axiom sponsor GOG. My name has been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.